who is wonderful to volunteer his time here to tell us a little bit about some of the train station tours. So I have a quick cheat sheet here so I can read. Philip Johnson is a retired senior quality engineer after working for several high-tech and aerospace companies. He is a lifelong rail fan and photographer. He took his first train ride at 1.5 years old at Edaville Railroad in Carver. I grew up near there, so.
Pictures to prove it.
Yeah. Philip has researched and written and self-published 2 books on a railroad from Western Mass. I think he's got some books here as well, so afterwards. He has started his 3rd book. He lectures on this railroad and other railroad subjects. Philip has been a member of the Amherst Railway Society for nearly 50 years and has served on their board of directors. Phil is also a member of several railroad historic societies. He also serves on several other boards and the Irving Historical Commission. Let's welcome Philip. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. This is an amazing turnout. Amazing. You folks right here, I'm going to be in your way off and on, but you'll just have to deal with it, okay? Because I've got to walk to the computer to change screens, so we'll have to do that. Thank you again to the Northfield 350th for inviting me. And I'll just get going here.
Can't see anything. Must be at a circuit.
Yeah.
Put another quarter in the meter.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing.
Wait for Sarah.
Yeah, that's.
Yep.
Well, they didn't have electricity here 50 years ago.
Apparently the lights and the outlets are on the same circuit, so we're going to have to run with the lights on. Good to know. No, the projector is powering up. So, Northfield 350, we've been in touch for some time, and the scope of what I'm going to talk about is the 2 railroads that exist in Northfield. And we're going to talk about the stations that were here, because those are always fascinating. I had a couple of surprises towards the end of the show. So once we're set here, I'm going to ask that you save your questions for the end. I'll stick around for a while, not forever, but I will try to answer every question, but please afterwards. I want to get through the show first, and those that want to leave can certainly leave, but you're welcome to stick around and ask questions later.
And everybody use your big voice when it's your turn to talk, because we do not have a sound system.
What's your loud voice? So, okay, how many railroads does Northfield have? As I said, it has 2 active rail lines. I still refer to NECR as the Central Vermont, because that's how it's stuck in my head. That's the north-south. And then Pan Am, which now is part of CSX or some other operating company. I still call it Boston or Maine. Okay, that came out of East Northfield and went down to Greenfield. Both lines are active today. Amtrak runs 1 train north and 1 train south every day, switches over the line to East Northfield Depot and goes down. The line from Northfield to Brattleboro opened in 1849.
Wow.
Yeah, that's 174 for a map. Back then it was called the Vermont of Massachusetts. It worked west out of Fitchburg area, got to Miller's Falls, then called Ralph's Corner, took a right turn, headed for Brattleboro rather than Greenfield, because it knew it couldn't get through the Hoosick Mountains. So Greenfield would have been the dead end, but Brattleboro was seen as a gateway, so it made its way to Brattleboro at that point. I apologize for the maps. They're not very big or clear, but I wanted to just post them anyway. The B&M line kind of runs down like this. The Central Vermont line runs down through Northfield down to Irving, where I live now. There's a couple of, there'll be more detail later. Don't sweat it. Don't strain your eyes. There's the real cheap and dirty version that I grabbed from another place. Okay? There's the B&M out of Deerfield and all of that. Comes up to East Northfield where we're standing. Crossed the river over to Dole Junction, went back to Brattleboro. The Central Vermont came out of New London and went all the way up to White River. Yeah? Neat stuff. That's the real cheap and dirty picture. Okay, let's talk about the Pan Am line for a moment, former Boston and Maine. It ran, as I said, it ran north from Greenfield to Brattleboro. They didn't get much farther than that. South of that, we call it the Con River line, Greenfield and south to Springfield, where it junction with other railroads. There were depots in Bernardston, Mount Herman, at the junction here, and another big depot at the other junction in Miller's Falls. As I said, there's 2 Amtraks a day. There's freight as needed 3 to 4 days a week only. Runs out of East Deerfield. There's the first station I'm going to show. It's a typical postcard shot. This is the Mount Herman station right down here at 142 where it crosses the tracks. Honestly, I'm not sure which corner it was, but that's where it was. It was for the students at the seminary. The word is that Dwight Moody hired an architect to design that because he wanted it nice and pretty. I don't know what his idea of nice and pretty is, but that's not mine. Okay? It's the only one in Northfield on that line. All the other stations are on the Central Vermont line. Probably been gone too long for most anybody in the room to have seen it themselves. The New England Central, as I said, the former Central Vermont. I'll probably call it Central Vermont without even thinking about it. Ran north from Miller's Falls through Northfield, crossed the Connecticut River before it got to here. Met at the junction here in the village of West Northfield, railroad called the East Northfield for some reason. On the way to Brattleboro, just because it sounded prettier, I think. Several stations along the line, but there was so many that they're only about 3 miles apart, so it was like the rabbit line. It just stopped every 100 yards to drop off and pick up. Amtrak runs from White River Junction to this junction down here, and then down to Greenfield, to Springfield, and you can take it from Greenfield all the way to Washington, D.C., which I have done. Freight is needed 5 or 6 days a week. I don't know if they ever run on Sundays. Doubt it very much. There's our Central Vermont stations. At the time that this document was published, they were still calling this junction South Vernon. Okay? You'll see a little bit more about that. I thought this was an interesting one because, you know, it gave you the station number, it gave you the state it's in, it gave you the miles from New London, in case you were curious, because that was their mileage point, and then the station agent, and then some telegraph codes for it. So, all kinds of information on one little piece of paper. Like I said, Miller's Falls, down in what we know as Miller's Falls side of Montague, was the junction with the B&M, east and west across the state, and the Central Vermont. It's still quite a busy place, but that station was hit in a derailment, I believe, in the 60s somewhere. And I see some heads nodding, and the exact date was 63 or 66, something like that, something in the mid-60s. And subsequently torn down because it had no use as a passenger station because there really were no passenger trains. That's just one out of my collection. Okay, let's start moving north from Miller's. We get to Northfield Farm Station. This actually is a photo I borrowed from the Historical Society with permission. It's just north of the Irving border, right near the current recreation area. It's almost across from where the cemetery is there. And those little side streets right down to the tracks. Interesting little guy, you know. Probably the station agent here and then some visitor on his bicycle. So that was how you got around way back when. But, you know, every station has its actual station name right on it. It's definitely Northfield Farms. Now, just to kind of pinpoint that, I'm just going to keep walking back and forth with people and stuff. There's our cemetery, which is also the post office. There's the station. right, not at the road that goes under the tracks, but just north of there, just a little bit. And that was quite a village at one point, for those of you who don't know. There's a very popular village called Northfield Farms. You know, a dozen houses now, we wouldn't call it a huge village. The next one running north was the station that they called Gill. It was really that flag stop. They only stopped on demand. You know, if they saw somebody standing out there like this, they tried to stop. Call it a taxi. But, you know, it has Gill, and then it has a couple mile markers on it. This has got to be late in its life because some of the windows are already broken, so it probably wasn't occupied too often. I found another one in a book the other day. I'm at least giving Robert Jones' CD book a call out there. But that's the same station. I don't recognize those. Maybe some of you folks do. There's a map on the next screen. I'll kind of show you. It's on the road to the ferry. Okay? There's Gill Station on the road to Mount's Ferry. Okay? Northfield, not there. You know, Northfield Farms a little farther south. A couple of miles apart, you know. Really old maps, you can find a lot of detail on them, but you have to really dig them out. I forget what year that one is. If I'm going too fast, just have me just yell out, slow down or something. If you guys are back in here, yell out again. Okay, Northfield Village Depot. I call it Northfield Village. They just called it Northfield. But this is right in the center of town by the cemetery. Okay? Very busy place this day. Double track main line for passing, right across from the cemetery. Make note of this projection number. I'll tell you a secret later, but only to you. Okay, again, we're right there. Okay, this is what I would call the center of town, the flashing light, if you will, or just below it. You go down. Yeah, this is running out. Basically, you'd head out, and the cemetery's over here. We're talking right here. There's no evidence. I was down there a couple of weeks ago. There's obviously no foundation left. It's been taken over by nature and the neighbors. Okay, a reverse view from the other side, probably taken in the teens or 20s of the last century. A postcard I found on the internet, but you can't read it, but it does say Northfield there. There's the cemetery. There's a truck, so it's got to be 20s. But you're looking right at it. They're standing in somebody's back, well, it'll be their backyard now. But you're looking right across at the back station. Moving north to Conn River Bridge. The photo was taken from this side of the river. You know the change in the abutments after the 35 or 36 flood, some of the bridge got damaged, so they raised it up and they used a different type of lattice work trusses than the original bridge. Some of the bridge came down. So you can see that, you can still see it today in the bridge. You'll see the stacked stone here and then concrete up above it. So the bridge was repaired. Yeah, you can actually get this. You take one of those little left turns going south from here, you can go down by the tracks and get a nice picture of the Amtrak coming across there at late afternoon. Just happen to know that. Our favorite bridge, the Shell Bridge. That obviously allowed people to access this wonderful new junction in West Northfield from the rest of the town. Erected in 1903, if the book that I stole this from was right, I borrowed it from. Here's the old Central Vermont station in South Vernon, before they built the next station I will show you. But there's a lot of tracks out front. It does say South Vernon Junction on the station sign. In case you're wondering, these little order boards, they would swing up or down to tell the train to stop. If they needed to give them orders or to pick up people. But that's a visual signal that they use, since they didn't have radios back then, like we do today. East Northfield Junction. There's the new station under construction, 1909. You know the railroad bridge overpass here, that we all know, that little highway bridge that goes over. And that's where the station was, right in that empty spot down below it. You can barely see it. There's that South Vernon station over there. Still there until they built the new station. South Vernon was the center of Vermont. This was a combo station. This is the completed station. The highway bridge is in place. And you can't hardly see it in this thing, but it does say South Vernon on this side, amazingly enough. We're what, 200 yards from the border, but it still says that. The view from the south side, same station, but it actually says East Northfield. 2 names on the same station.
That's the B&M end of the station.
That's the B&M end of the station, yeah.
And the reason it's called East Northfield is because it drew traffic from the central Vermont going to Northfield to get to the schools, the hotel, and all that stuff. It's in East Northfield. So just named that East Northfield.
The railroad, I've
Marketing ploy.
Marketing ploy, that's the words I was looking for, yeah. It's in most of the books, that's how they describe
The
it.
sign is still up there on the other side of the tracks. Where the station is.
A
where the
different
front
sign, but yeah.
East Northfield's still there.
Yep, you'll see that again in a couple of slides. Here's another view of it before they built the platforms. The canopies over the platforms. But South Vernon's still there. The timing's a little different. You know, a lot of these postcards and images that I grab, you know, don't really have a good date on them, you know, unless you physically have the postcard with a postage stamp on the back of it, you really don't know. But this one, you know, the artist wrote West Northfield, Mass, because that's the village. That's the location, not the railroad location. Okay, another simplified track diagram of what was left in 1974. There's our B&M to Greenfield. There's our central Vermont to New London, central Vermont to Bratt, and up to White River. This little line is that line I showed that goes over, crosses the river again, and goes over to Dole Junction, where there was actually a junction of the Cheshire coming up from Ashburnham, Mass, and headed for Keene. They wanted to go to Keene. B&M wanted to get to Brattleboro because there's business in Brattleboro. They want to get there. So they didn't want to pay the tariff for using someone else's tracks. So they built their own railroad. And this is one of the last 2 railroads actually built in Massachusetts, 1913 time frame. Yep. So I've got the state books, and it's the only 2 listed. Another view from the highway bridge. You can tell there's no junction built here. There's no track following that road over here. The South Vernon station is gone. So apparently this is in full operation, all moved in and everything. But it's just such a nice, pretty picture, I had to include it. I'm going real fast.
That's fine.
From the backside, you can see it's a very busy place. Cars, carriages, horses, all kinds of people in there. Apparently a train or 2 is coming within minutes. So they're there to drop off or pick up or take a ride. It's the only one I've seen at the backside of the station, usually on track side. Okay, probably repeating myself, but today's evidence of railroad activity, the Vermonter runs twice a day, once each direction, stops in Brattleboro and Greenfield. This is like the halfway point between. It's 30-35 minutes between the 2 stations. Freight trains as needed, 2 trains on the NECR, Pan Am as needed. Christmas Eve, I happen to be standing there waiting for the southbound Vermonter, and the engineer, I don't know him, but I have 2 other friends with us, he played Jingle Bells on the horn. Just because it was Christmas Eve. Thank you. That was cool.
Probably.
That was 21. Every now and then, the Amtrak likes to show off and run some of its specially painted locomotives around. This was celebrating their 50th anniversary, one of the several they painted. That's my car, but, you know, so I was obviously on the highway bridge taking a nice picture. And I like going there for shots because he has to slow down when he goes through the switch to make the change of railroads. He also has to radio in and say how many passengers he's got on board and all sorts of information as they hand off from one dispatcher to another. They have to do this, so it's a nice spot to get pictures. Please rail fan safely. Another 50th anniversary locomotive. I was standing on the ground next to the signal. It's just different. Who doesn't love a train wreck? This one was taken from Robert Jones's Central Vermont boat series. I'm going to guess that looks like Northfield Farm somewhere because of the farm and looking across the valley to the mountains on the other side. That's my guess.
It's not the only one. There was one sometime in the late 50s, maybe 56, 57, it was a train full of watermelons.
That wasn't this one.
No?
It's not watermelon, because that truck's too old. But there was another one. Unknown photographer, unknown exact location, you just said Northfield. Well, it could be the same place, or nearby. You know, again from Jones's book. It's part of the train, and that work train, that here. One of Northfield Farms itself is identified as Northfield Farms. I'm going to guess this is an underpass unless it was a washout. Could be that underpass that goes down to the boat launch. I'm guessing. 1898, that's an old coach. But wait, there's more. 1995, are any stations still standing? I found it, Northfield Village Station. Remember we saw that?
Yes.
Short version of the long story, I was Cub Master in Greenfield then, and one of our members said, hey, we can use the Kiwanis Club up in Bernardston that my dad belongs to, and we can use their thing. I'll just get it cleared with him. We can have our banquet there. We can have our camp out and all that stuff. So that was 2002. I was delighted. They had to pull me out of there. And just because you can compare the two pictures, that's the same station. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. So I don't know when it was taken down and moved over there, do you?
I don't know for sure, okay. I know it was still there in the mid-50s.
Here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was still standing.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, that was in pretty good shape. The timbers were good.
Yeah.
They, you know, it was post and beam basically. And apparently they took it down and trucked it over there. That's quite a move.
Yeah, yeah.
Disassemble, label it all.
Well, yeah, you saw it. It's got some dynamite, okay, brackets holding that lift extension up.
And they used them all again.
Yeah, they preserved them all, used them all. The building
If
itself.
only they didn't put that barbecue pit thing on the end, I could cinch it by saying, yeah, that's the same. Look at the roof line.
Yeah.
So a piece of Northfield is still standing. Okay, I have to do my little thing for photo credits. Basically, if they came from private collections, I know the owner or the photographer. I noted them as such. Otherwise, they're internet photos that any of us can find, or the few that are actually my own photos. So, photo credit's been granted. I'm legal now. I can steal anything. Okay. If you need to contact me later, hamdenphil@gmail.com. Now I can take questions, whatever you got. Yes, sir.
You mentioned at the beginning they couldn't go through the Hoosick tunnel. Why was that?
Wasn't there. In 1849, it wasn't there.
Oh, okay. once it was built, they could do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. But see, as I was saying, the railroads came out of the eastern part of the state. Basically, the Fitchburg Railroad was part of, before that, it was called the Vermont, Massachusetts. It came out to west to Miller's Falls, and then took that right turn and followed the Con River up to Brattleboro. They didn't see any customer needing their services west of Miller's because of the tool factories and paper mills and such. You know, there was a few things in Greenfield, but 1840s, Greenfield was still pretty rural. And the rest of the valley is nothing, really. It's all farms. So they just went up to Vermont, and then
I think we'll wrap it up, unless there's any last minute quick questions, but we can talk afterwards and stuff. It's good.
talk one-on-one over here.
Yeah, excellent. So thank you all for coming.